Alright, this is an extra video that after uploading my other one where I add the power up and the particle effects, I decided I want to talk only about particle systems because I know there's a lot to take in. There's a lot to really think about how they will look. So I'm going to create a particle system. I'm going to talk about it for probably about 20 or 30 minutes, so I'm not going to lie about that. So I'm going to go through every single thing on here. We're going to start with the upper part of it. This is just a generic particle system setup. Duration. This is a cycle on which the particle system goes through. So if we turn off looping and we hit play, this will play for 5 seconds right here, and then it will stop. So this is what the duration means. Start delay. How long will it be before the particle system starts? Then you also have pre-warm. So I'm going to show you what the difference is between non-pre-warm and pre-warm. Pre-warm basically already has it all set up. So if I hit pause and then I hit play so I can see the scene, we'll wait for this to start. This is what the player will see as soon as they see the scene. But once it starts, then look at everything. It's like, whoa, what the hell? So that's what pre-warm does. In fact, that's something I should have done for the Dash particle system is pre-warm it. So it already starts playing on a certain frame to give it the effect of what you'd expect to see. So if I come back down here to this particle system, this pre-warm is already checked. Now when I pause it and hit play, you'll see that there's already particle systems in the scene, and they're already going. So that's what pre-warm does. So we have the start lifetime. Now I know this is kind of weird, but just think of it as just its lifetime. How long do the particles themselves live before they are destroyed? So if I play this particle system, right now it's set at 5, I'm going to set it to 1. So see, they're not going as high because they're dying before then. The start speed is how fast are they moving. So if I change this to 1, they move a lot slower. 3D start size. So I'm going to explain this. The start size of what they are, if they were 10, this just changes the size of them. Then you have 3D start size. Now this one is actually really interesting. So you have X and Z. So if I set this to 10, they become all stretched. If I set Z to 10, we don't see anything. That's because actually the Y-axis is up, not Z. But by setting this to 10, you'll see that you get a unique look. 3D start rotation. So you don't really see anything change with this, but if you were to have, in fact, I'll go ahead and set this value real quickly. You don't see anything change at all. You kind of see like the squares around it are changing, but inside the scene view, the particles actually look the exact same. So what this is this is how much the sprite itself is rotated. Now, if we were to use images like we've been creating down here, you can actually use these images in place of the particles themselves. I'll explain that later on in during this month. But this is just what they start off on the rotation value. You can also flip the rotation, and you can change their start color. These only define as when they start. This doesn't really say anything about how they interact. Gravity modifier does exactly what you think they would. They'll start off going up, and then the gravity will kick in. They'll go straight down. You can essentially change their start speed to 10, and you'll see them coming up like a fountain, and then gravity will kick in, and it'll bring them back down. You can change the gravity however you want. You can actually make this a negative value and have it just go straight up. So that's what the gravity modifier does. Simulation space will give you an option between local, world, or custom. If it's local, it's only local to whatever it's attached to. Whereas world is the simulation space is no matter where this is at, it'll simulate according to where it's at in the world position. I'm actually going to move this back over here. So that's the difference between these two. Custom, you can actually specify where you want the transform to be and how it will simulate in there. We have simulation speed. Simulation speed is similar to the start speed. The only difference is the way it is simulating, how fast it is simulating. Delta time. So we have scaled and unscaled. Scaled delta time means it will use its own scaling to work within. I'm trying to think how to explain this. Crap. So scaled delta time will basically allow scaling. Unscaled means it will play the same no matter what the speed is going. Scaling mode, once again, this goes back to the hierarchy, the local, or the shape. Usually I leave these alone. There's no reason to play them. Play on awake, well, this is simply what you think. Once the game starts, it will play or it will not, which means something will need to activate it. The emitter velocity, well, this works off of its rigid body. You can actually do it off of its transform, which, once again, this is not something I really deal with. Max particles, now this one is actually really important. So I'm going to set emission to 10,000. So right now it just looks like it's looping. The reason why it looks like it's looping because it's only giving us 1,000 particles at a time. But if I put another 0 here, now we can see it's starting to do something different. So that's the thing with max particles. How many particles will be emitted from this at any given time? So I'm not really worried about these last three. I'm going to start going into emission. Rate over time, how many particles are being emitted. So as you can see by just changing this value, this will change how many particles are being emitted over whatever. Bursts. So earlier for the ground pound, I set up the burst. The way this works is every so often it will do a burst, and this works off of the duration. So if I set the duration to 1, we'll now get a burst every single second. If I set this to 0.1, we'll get a burst every 1/10 of a second, and as 5, you'll see it once every 5 seconds. So this strictly works off of the duration. If you're using this and you don't want to use a rate over time, you don't have to. It will still do it. You also saw me do that with ground pound. And you can actually create different bursts within here. You can change the interval, you can change the probability. You can do all sorts of crazy things with the bursts. So actually, I'm going to set this to 0, and we're going to set the duration to 1, so we don't have to sit there and wait. I'm going to create another one that has a 50% probability of doing a 100 round burst. So we can see, like right in here, that we're getting some 100 round bursts. I'm actually going to set this to 10, and then we'll be able to clearly see a difference between the 100 and the 50. So if I set this to 0.25, every 4 times you might see it go once. So there we go. Took a little bit longer, but we got it. I'm going to set this back to 10. Shape. Shape is actually the way it is emitted right now. By default, it's set to cone. We can set this to any one of these that we want to have it emit out of. So if we were to set to a rectangle, for example, right now it's coming out of the surface of the rectangle. Just like if we come down here and we set it to circle like I like doing, it's coming out of the surface of the circle. Now circle gives you a lot more options to work with. One of the examples is we have the mode. So we can do a random, a loop, a ping pong, a burst spread. We can do anything we want. So burst spread is basically just like how they're coming out. Ping pong is actually really interesting because a ping pong will actually go around this way, go back, and it just kind of like goes back and forth around this circle. Loop, that just goes around the circle itself. Burst spread has always been one of those that I'd never really worked with a whole lot, so I'm not super familiar with it. But when it comes to setting up the looping or the ping pong, we'll see that we're getting this in different areas of the edge. That's because right now this is considered as one thick circle. Like this is a solid circle. But if we change the radius to 0.1, well, now it's still doing it within the circle, but it's doing it within a smaller radius. We can set this to 2.2, but set the radius thickness to here. So now it's only doing it within this little ring right here. So that's the setup on those. A sprite renderer, you can use any kind of sprite and it will emit from the entire sprite. Same thing with the sprite. I never really use those a whole lot. A mesh render, this would be emitting off of a 3D object. Once again, I don't really use those a whole lot. A sphere, y'all should be fairly familiar with those. It uses the same thing as a circle, but now it's doing it on 3 different axes. So I'm actually going to put this back to cone. I'm going to take this off of loop and just have it set back to random. With a cone, you can actually do it off of the volume or off the base. So I'm going to go to velocity over lifetime. I actually need to increase its lifetime, so I'm going to say 5. And the reason why I'm doing that, because I'm actually going to do a velocity over lifetime. So right now, these are all moving at the same speed. However, we will get into this little window down here in just a second. If, say we wanted to, I don't know, increase the speed over time. Let's set this to 10. And the radial will set to, I don't know, 50. What? Oh, crap. That's my bad. There we go. So we're actually setting the radial. I need to slow this down. Let me put it back at 1. So the, oh, come on, Jimmy, think. It's actually using the radial of its component, I guess you'll say, and setting its speed modifier as 1. Not something I've really used a whole lot, as y'all can tell. But you can actually use curves to change its velocity. I just can't remember how to off the top of my head. But you can also do it between a constant, a curve, and between 2 constants. Or 2 curves, I mean. So if we were to do a curve, I'm going to set this down here at 0. And this over here at 1. So it shoots off. Let's see. That's on the Z, that's why. So I actually want to select all of these. I'm going to do the same for all of them. So now, still not quite. Well, I guess it is kind of. No, not quite. So I was hoping I could show you guys this a little bit better. But basically is what I was wanting it to do. Oh, wait. Actually, I need to do it right here. This is where the curve really comes into play. So when it starts, it should be slow, and then it should start speeding up. We could also set it where we want it to be, where it starts off fast, and then, well, it's going back the other way because I'm at a negative value. Move this up just a little bit. So it'll shoot out, and then it'll slow down, and then it'll stop. This is what velocity over lifetime does. This is what I was trying to remember how to do. I've only had to use this, like, I think 1 time, and that was probably 6 months ago, so I don't really use it too much. You can also limit the velocity over lifetime, force over lifetime, color over lifetime. A lot of these I don't really use, but color over lifetime I use the crap out of. I've already kind of explained to you guys how this works, so I'm not really going to go over it. Color by speed. This one is actually really interesting. So if the speed range is 0 or 1, it's actually going to use this right here. So if we were to change this to black, so black will be full speed and 0 speed will be white. So I actually need to change the start size of this so y'all can see it. 3 start size, I'm going to say 20. It's not doing it. Why not? What did I forget? I don't know what I forgot. But basically, essentially, it should be starting off as black and then turning into white as it goes out. Apparently, I forgot to do something. I just don't know what it was. So, once again, I don't really use color by speed. I always use color over lifetime. I think it's easier to deal with. Size by speed, that's it. Basically just changing its size. And you can make it slower or bigger depending on its size. Rotation over lifetime. This one I will show you because this is actually very helpful. So we have the angular velocity, and we can set this to 180. So what's going to happen is it'll start off at 0, and as it goes out, it'll continue to rotate every so often. So if I change this to 10, you'll see it slowly rotating. So external forces. This is another one I use the crap out of. this one, and noise. So external forces are anything that's outside of it that can mess with it. The reason why I use this is because you can have turbulence, you can have wind, you can have different things that can actually interact with a particle system. So they can give it that little extra depth. We don't have any of that in this game, so I can't really show you a whole lot. But another way you can kind of get around that, and this is something we will use, is noise. So I'm actually going to show you this real quickly. I'm going to set the start lifetime to 50. I'm going to set the start size. Come on. 50 may be a little much. I'm going to set the start size to 5. Any day now, Scooter. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn off velocity over lifetime. And there is a reason for this. And y'all are going to think this is just wild. The next thing I want to do, I'm going to move this into the scene. I know it looks like a horrendous volcano. But I'm actually going to change the size to a rectangle. Wait for it to compile. I actually need to lower the lifetime that these things are alive for. And so I'm going to change it from 50 to 10. Dearsty. Now I'm moving this up where it's outside of camera view. So I need to be way up here. And then down here, let's see, how do I want to do this? Probably just want to set the scale on the X to 20. Scale to Y can stay because that's not really going to be affected. I'm going to set this to 5 for the Z. So we now have this. Let me make that a little bit wider. Wait, is that really the Y? It shouldn't be. Hey, it is. Okay. So is what we're going to do is we're going to set the start speed to 0.1. And we're actually going to come in here. I'm going to set the gravity modifier to 0.25. I think 0.25 is a little much. 0.1. So I actually need to lower or change the start size. I'm going to change this to 1. So this would be something like it's Christmas time and it's snowing. This is how we would do this effect. If we want to change like how much wind there is, we just increase the strength. And we can also change the frequency. And we can actually have this animated. I don't remember how. I know we can have this animated. Oh, scroll speed, that's what it is. So if we set this to 1. So this is actually a little too strong, but y'all get the idea. If we want to just like leaves or regular particles or something like that falling, we'd actually change this to 0.0, let's say 1.5. And I'd actually get rid of, or actually change the noise strength to 0.2. So now we have this. And then the next thing I want to do is come in here. I'm actually going to change the start size to 0.2 as well. Make them where they're there, but they're just barely noticeable. So one of the advantages of doing this is you can actually have a... I'm trying to think how to explain it. If I were to change the gravity modifier to 0, because right now this still just looks like snow, and I just move this here, let me go and change this. Well, no, I don't really want to change the start speed. But I'm actually going to set this here. Normally I do this as a cube, and I think that would actually be a lot better instead of a rectangle. So let's go ahead and do this as a cube, which would not be rectangle. What would it be? A box. That's what it is. So I'm going to do a box. I'm actually going to lower its start speed. I'm going to say 025. Let's see what that looks like. So we still have this in here. We actually probably just need to turn that off. No, we probably want that on. We just want to lower the frequency. So I'm going to say 025. And then we have the scroll speed, which we would want to be 0.2. And then we're going to change the color. We're actually going to do color over lifetime, because I told you how much I like using it. As always, I come in here, drag this over. I drag this over. There we go. I'll click on this one. I'm going to set this to 0. I'll click on this. I'm actually going to use like a yellow. Not green, you little bastard. There we go. And so this just gives, like, if this was in a forest, you could use this as like just little particles coming around. Now one thing is that these just appear. So if I click up here in this gray area, and I click one more time in the gray area, up at the top, I can actually set this value to 0. What this will do, instead of just having them appear out of nowhere, they'll fade into existence, and then they'll fade out of existence. So we just seen this one and that one fade into existence. So that's the advantage of doing that. Let's see, collision. Basically anything that has a collider on it, we can actually set it to that. We can also keep it from clipping through the ground. So if we set it to world, this will actually check the collision properties on everything within the scene. Now keep in mind, this is using 3D collisions. If we set to 2D collisions, it will collide with the sprites, but it will phase through the ground. Oh no, actually it still bounces on the ground. I'm actually really shocked. Still phasing through the sprite. Well, those sprites are fine. But it should be bouncing off of these right here. Yeah, so we got that one that has a little bit of bounce. It's like, screw this, my life sucks. But the rest of these, it should bounce off the player as well. But like these enemies right here, it should bounce off of this one back here, but not this one, because this one I think is just a trigger. So if it's trigger, it won't bounce off of it or anything. Otherwise, it will. Collision quality, high. So high takes a lot more calculations to do than the others, but you're going to get a much, much more accurate result with it. Medium and low, I mean, that's just as you expect it. It'll still collide with them, but it won't be as accurate. Max collision shapes, just as it sounds. How many shapes is it able to calculate and collide with? And then we have, I'm not really worried about these, but then we have triggers. You can actually set these to different triggers within the scene. I don't think we're really going to have any sprites interacting with anything since we're doing a draw with the sprites for the attack. So, but basically you can actually set up a trigger and have a script attached to the sprite. So when it collides with something, it will actually, it'll do whatever you're calling it to do inside the scripts. The only thing is make sure you have send collision messages checked. And I just checked it, so hopefully it'll pop up. And I will be right back, you guys. Alright, and I'm back. I had to use bathroom. So, send collision messages, yeah, so I already explained that. Sub-emitters. So the way sub-emitters work is we have a particle system, and we need a prefab with another particle system attached to this. So if I go ahead and check this is probably going to take a while to render. You know, in fact, I'm actually going to change the max particles from 1,000. I'm just going to change it to 100. So if I click down here, get rid of that, this should render a lot faster now. We shouldn't have this lag anymore. So you can do this at birth, at collision, death, trigger, or you can set up as a manual. So I'm actually going to do this real quick. I'm actually going to create another effect, particle system. This is just going to be called sub-emitter. So a sub-emitter, what is that exactly? Well, what this is we come in here, And we come down here. There we go. Right to drag that in here. Any day now, Scooter. Just gotta wait. I think a lot of it is why it's taking so long to calculate is because how much I've modified this particle system. And I think that's a lot of what's going on. I promise my computer's not frozen. I'm just not touching the mouse. Hopefully it'll drop in soon. If not, I'll just create a new particle system. You know, in fact, that's what I think I'm going to do. I'm just going to create a new particle system. I'm going to modify the crap out of that one again. Because this is just getting ridiculous. I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to wait for it to finish loading. Alright, we are back. It finally finished. So we're going to create a particle system. I'm actually going to create another particle system within this. So this is a child of this game object. The one thing I want to do is I want to set its lifetime to 1. I'm going to move over here so y'all can see it. And then for this particle system, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm also going to make its color black. So I want us to be able to see it very, very easily. The reason for this is I actually want to create, for the sub-emitter, I'm going to turn this on. And instead of being at birth, I want it to be at death. So once a particle dies, this particle will instantiate. In fact, instead of setting this up, I'm going to do a duration. I'm not going to have looping. I'm actually going to go down to emission. I'm going to change this down to 0. I'm going to do a burst, and it's going to do a count of 30. And so this will be as soon as it starts, basically. So we're going to drag this in here. So as soon as these particles are dying, it's actually instantiating these particle systems as soon as they die. And that is just really hard to watch. If we want to, we could actually come in here and do a gravity modifier. I think this would actually give it a really unique look, something like a pume cloud. So we need to increase its lifetime, obviously. But, you know, that's something that you could do with a sub-emitter. I'm going to turn that off because that's just too hard to watch. Texture sheet animation. Oh, wait. So texture sheet animation is very simple, similar to a sprite sheet animation. I'm actually going to open up Google Chrome and show you exactly what I'm talking about in case you are unaware. I'm going to type in sprite sheet animation, and we're going to go to images, and we're just going to look at this. Now this is one solid image for a character that is running. So if this was a sprite sheet animation, oh, here's a perfect example of a sprite sheet animation. So this is frame 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way through until it plays this entire sheet animation. Here's another example. See, this is actually Unity 5, so it's just another simple explosion that starts off. So that's what the sprite sheet animation is. And this will specify how many tiles there are on the X and on the Y. So the first one we saw with the girl running, I think there was like 7 images. So the X would be 7 and the Y would just be 1. So we have start frame at 0, as I said, 0, 1, 2, 3. Cycles, how many times will it cycle through. Time mode, will it play through the lifetime speed, frames per second. And you can also specify it as a single row or a whole sheet. So that's what texture sheet animation is. I actually created this for my door. Whenever the door started going and you saw the steam or whatever shooting out of the air tanks, that's what I did, was a texture sheet animation for that. Lights, it's just as it sounds. You attach a light to it and the particles emit their own light. Trails, I've never really used trails before, nor have I used custom data. But the thing I do use a lot is the renderer. Now when you do this, this is using a standard particles unlit shader. You actually have to create your own shader, and you do that by right-clicking, create, material. And we have a new material here. I'm not going to add this to the build, so I'm just going to keep it as new material. And we click on this, we click on this, there we go, and we're going to go down to particles, and we had standard surface and standard unlit. Now the URP system does have particles in it, so in this case this is what we'd want to use for this. So if we come to particles, we have lit, simple lit, and unlit. Those would be the three that we have the options for. And we can actually change the surface type from opaque to transparent. We can change the render faces, the alpha clipping. We can change all of this. If alpha clipping is checked, we will have the slider. The lower the slider, I think it becomes just one solid color or one solid image. The higher, it's completely transparent. So that's what that is. And this only works if, say, your image... In fact, I can go ahead and show you this real quick. I'm going to go ahead and throw this on here as a base map. So we have the material right here. We have the material right here. Okay, I just got lost there for a second. I'm going to come down here. I'm actually just going to drag this material on here. So now we're getting the ground pound on here. The ground pound, we have checked for... Where is it? Okay, well, we don't have... Oh, yeah, alpha is transparency. This is what I was looking for. So this is checked. So the clipping will work for this. You'll notice it's kind of black right now. That's fine. I'm going to change its speed to 0.5. I'm going to change its speed to 1. So the purpose of this right here is we are now using this new material. This way I can actually show you more properly on the rendering of this. Billboard will always be the way that the sprite is facing. To move this over here. So this is actually interacting with the 3D, oh, I'm sorry, the 2D light. Nope, it's interacting with the 3D light then. Looks like it's 3D, or yeah, the 3D light that's interacting with, which makes sense because it is a... Yeah, it's interacting with the 3D light. Okay, so this is a 3D object, hence the 3D light it's interacting with. I thought we set it as... No, we set the other one to 2D, that's what it was. So, either way. Sort mode. Sort by distance, oldest in front, youngest in front. This basically just decides like how these sprites are going to be sorted. You can actually get some really unique looks with this. So the next thing I want to show you is if we change this from billboard to stretch billboard. Well, that's an interesting look. Come on, Unity. So if you notice, it's still kind of following us. And horizontal billboard, well, that's kind of like, yeah. That's all that is. But now we get vertical billboard. So the billboards are still following us, but they're now only vertically facing. And the horizontal billboards are the same way, where they're still facing us no matter which way we turn, but only horizontally. Whereas billboard, those will face you no matter what. If it is a mesh, this is where it gets interesting. So these, if I go and hit pause, this is a mesh, but if you look, you'll notice it actually has a cube shape to these. And the reason for that, if I try to get right here, you can actually see on this face of the cube, there is another ground pound icon. You can actually change the mesh of this. You can change it to whatever you want. This is all within the Unity system, so we can change it to sphere, plane, cylinder. We can change it to anything we want within the mesh. We can also bring in custom mesh and apply it to that. So I'm going to set this back to billboard. Flip, well, that's just what you'd expect it. It flips it. If we didn't like the way the Y looked, we could flip it around to match more of what we wanted. Masking, this is going to be what is hiding the particle system. This can really help, say, if you're trying to create a hallway and it's coming through the hallway or something where you can see it through the hallway. This is where you'd use masking. Cast shadows, this is just as it sounds. Will the particles cast shadows or not? And reflection probes and light probes, this is going to be decided if it's going to be reflective or not. So one of the other advantages of creating a new material, this can only be lit up if it's near a light. What if it's way out here outside the light? Well, this is where our emission comes into play. We can actually increase this to white, And we'll bring down the color just a little bit. So now the color of this is what's going to actually bring it up. But we can also come in here and do an additive. You don't really see a whole lot of difference, but basically, oh, actually I can show you the clipping. So clipping, higher it goes, the more transparent it looks. The lower it goes, the more solid it looks. I'm going to put it right about here. And I'm also going to make it transparent. And I'm also going to say blending mode. I'm going to say additive. So here's what's really cool about this, is we have additive, so if there's other sprites behind it, it'll literally just add to its transparency. Pre-multiply, yeah, not very spectacular, but you still have it. Multiply this one will actually take it and do the same thing what we were just talking about, but it does it in a different, what is this word? It does it in a different way. I don't know how to describe it, so I apologize for that. Since we have this, when we crank up the whiteness on it, it will start disappearing. I don't believe lights affect it. Yeah, so lights don't affect, well, they do kind of, but also we're getting outside of its range, I think. So lights do kind of affect it, but not in the way you would think they would. The reason why it says disappearing, because I think I have a draw distance on this, which has caused them to become even more transparent over space. But, so yeah, this is a lot of the particle systems. There's a lot more stuff that's even more in depth than this. Some of the guys who have been dealing with Unity for a long time, who only deal with particle systems, those are going to be mainly your technical artists. They are way better at this stuff than I am. I'm literally just showing you guys the basics, giving you guys an understanding on how you can make something really look unique and how to work with different things. A lot of this stuff is experimental. I don't just look at something like the dash, for example. I didn't just look at this dash and automatically know how the particle systems I need to set. Like, I had an idea on how I was going to set them up, but I didn't know, like, I'm trying to think of a good example. I knew what to do to set them up to give it the effect I wanted, but I didn't know how it was going to look until I got to that point. And from there, it's just fine-tuning what you're trying to do. So that's all it is when it comes to setting up particle systems. So I want you guys to try and you're probably going to have to watch this video a couple times to really understand it in depth. But I want you guys to try and figure out something unique to do with these other two power-ups. And then also I'm thinking a particle system for whenever the characters die. Now I will make that. I'm going to use a sprite sheet animation for their death. So you won't have to worry about that. But until next time, I'll see y'all later.